Lately, there's been talk about Paramount or Netflix potentially acquiring Warner Bros. Discovery, and a lot of people have been speculating how that could affect James Gunn's Superman movies, his DCEU in general, and even Matt Reeves' Batman universe moving forward, and if changes in Warner Bros. Ownership could somehow create a path for Henry Cavill, Zack Snyder, and other parts of the DCEU to return to screens with new movies. And in this video, I'm going to share with you my honest thoughts about just how viable this scenario is and what possible circumstances could ever lead to it happening. Now, for those who are new to my channel, I was one of the first people to accurately report that James Gunn's Superman was in fact a box office flop, and that Warner Bros. Had made a tremendous effort to play down that failure with aggressive PR spins in order to keep their stock price up before a potential company sale. And if you've already been enjoying my videos for a while but haven't yet subscribed to my channel, or if you just want to stay informed, please take a second to do that now, as it would really boost my efforts. So when it comes to any kind of possible acquisition of Warner Bros., whether it's by Paramount, Netflix, or even Amazon, who are rumored to be preparing bids, my personal opinion is that immediately after any possible sale, most new owners and managements would probably wait until the end of 2027 before considering any drastic changes to both James Gunn's DCU and Matt Reeves' Batman universe. I say that because on a business level, if there's existing expensive projects that are already in motion, the new people in charge would likely at least give those projects a chance to perform before they replace any key personnel in their company. And with that in mind, I also think that's probably why James Gunn seemed pretty eager to announce his so-called Superman sequel, Man of Tomorrow, amidst all these acquisition rumors as a type of job security, because after this high-profile movie has already been announced with an official release date, it's more of a big deal to cancel it, unless you're Kathleen Kennedy who just announces stuff and then vanishes. And while a potential Warner Bros. Sale likely won't impact other existing movie productions like Supergirl, Clayface, Man of Tomorrow, and The Batman 2, I would say that both James Gunn and Matt Reeves' fate will ultimately be decided by how well their current respective theatrical projects do at the box office. And if they don't perform well, that's when real decisions would have to get made about DC in general, and to be honest, that would likely happen even if there's no sale at all, and Zaslav also remains the CEO. But let's imagine that one of the big studios like Paramount, Netflix, or Amazon do end up buying Warner Bros. How would they respond if all the current projects flop, and would this type of failure be the moment where Henry Cavill, Zack Snyder, and the DCEU could ever be revisited? And while I'm sure everybody's looking for a very quick and easy answer to this, it's actually quite complicated. As far as Amazon goes, I think that they're usually kind of unpredictable. On the one hand, they do have a lot of money to spend, and they do end up buying a lot of things like Lord of the Rings and James Bond, but then the question is, what do they actually do with them? Lord of the Rings cost them a lot of money, but they completely took a dump on Tolkien's lore, and didn't really win any fans in the process. And when it comes to James Bond, it seems like they keep making all the wrong decisions too. So I don't know exactly what I would say about them, but personally, I tend to think that when it comes to Paramount, now led by multi-billionaire David Ellison, he probably would be open to anything that could generate money for him without limiting any possibilities, so I wouldn't necessarily rule anything out on that front. At the same time, Netflix has done a lot of business with Zack Snyder over the years, so you'd think that if they control the DCU's past movie catalog and it performed well for them on Netflix, maybe they could be open to doing more projects with Snyder and maybe even a Justice League Part 2. And while these things sound nice in theory, there are many challenges here that wouldn't be so easy to overcome. For starters, and there's really no way around this, most of these DCEU actors have aged significantly since we last saw them in these roles. It's hard to believe this, but Henry Cavill was in his late 20s when he appeared in 2013's Man of Steel, and by the time we'd potentially see him in a sequel to that movie, or any other DCEU revival movie, which would be no earlier than 2029, Cavill would already be in his 40s, Gal Gadot as well, Ben Affleck would be in his mid-50s, and even Jason Momoa would be around 50. Not that I'm saying that they would be too old or couldn't do any more movies, but age-wise, it doesn't exactly seem like the type of cast you continue to build on for the future long term. And ironically, actors that are a bit younger in that cast, like Ezra and Amber, are not likely to get hired for anything these days, if you know what I mean. And all of this is perhaps why any new studio that would potentially own DC would also consider just starting from scratch, again, after a few years of hiatus. And behind the camera, there's also the matter of Snyder himself, who hasn't really had any major theatrical movie releases over the past several years. And even Snyder's most recent direct-to-streaming big-budget Netflix movies, Rebel Moon Part 1 and 2, were very expensive to produce, but weren't very well received and weren't able to leave much of a pop culture footprint, which is probably why their viewing numbers were largely seen as a disappointment within Netflix. So I don't know if at this moment in time, Paramount, Amazon, or Netflix would want to take such a big financial gamble on Snyder, but I guess you never know. Now, could they still make a movie with one or more of the DCEU cast, but choose different directors and producers for it? I suppose that's possible too. If you ask me though, if the opportunity were to ever present itself and I was in charge of Warner Brothers, this is at minimum what I would do. Make one movie starring Henry Cavill as Superman, Ben Affleck as Batman, Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and possibly Jason Momoa as Aquaman. Don't call it Justice League Part 2 so that certain characters from that Part 1 movie could just be brushed aside. And bill it as a grand finale for the DCEU. Give the people that throughout the years paid to watch all of those previous movies a sense of closure. And also give this cast a proper send-off, something that I've always felt that they should have been given. Whether it's a theatrical release or direct-to-streaming, I do think it would perform well enough to justify its own existence, and if nothing else, it would show a minimum amount of respect to customers and restore some goodwill towards the DC brand. As for Snyder himself, I've always maintained that while I don't dislike his style as a director, I think his screenwriting usually isn't strong enough, and I would hope that any potential DCEU revival movie that would potentially involve Snyder would also involve bringing in a very talented screenwriter to really help deliver something special. And if this scenario isn't possible, I suppose I just want to see another solo Superman movie with Henry Cavill, with or without Zack Snyder's direct involvement. I've always really liked Cavill in the role, and I feel like there's so much more that could be done with him as Superman. But of course, everything I've discussed here is very speculative. In reality, so many different things would have to align for any type of DCEU revival, and while the odds of this certainly aren't great, I would say that they're probably a bit better than they've been in a long time, because there's at least a theoretical chance, no matter how small.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
If you want my very honest opinion though, if let's say a month ago the odds of a new DCEU film ever happening were about a 1% chance, now I'd say that they're about a 10% chance. So still nothing to be too hopeful about, but if you like the DCEU and a Warner Brothers sale does happen, it could be a never say never type of situation, which I suppose is better than nothing. And if you get a chance, I'd also be interested in hearing your thoughts about this, so make sure to let me know what you think in the comments, and if you've made it to this point in the video and you haven't yet liked and subscribed, please consider doing so now, as it would really help my channel. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.